Hello. I am standing in between you and lunch. Yay. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure. I'm probably like this unicorn up here because I've been at my startup for a year, so I don't have some giant wealth of knowledge about what I'm delivering to you on a silver platter. It's like, I am a human in the world, and I generally am really optimistic and trust people, so that's where I'm coming at from today. So when I first started to think about this talk, I was like, I don't think that there's a definition for trust. I don't think that there's one definition for trust. And so I did what any speaker would do, which was I Googled it. I just Googled trust, as anyone would do. And one of the most popular image results is the trust fall. Has anyone done a trust fall, or is it like totally out of fashion? Nobody, oh, you guys have done it, okay. We'll have a little talk afterwards. Maybe you can like teach other people how it goes down. So a trust fall, is basically trying to get at trust. And as it turns out, the trust fall totally contains the two elements that are completely necessary for trust. So here's a Boy Scout, and he's doing a trust fall into the arms of his troop. And there are two things that are going on right now with the Boy Scout. The first is he's vulnerable, right? So he's like super vulnerable. And the second thing that's going on is that he's optimistic about the future. So he wouldn't be doing this unless he was optimistic about the outcome, and the outcome being that he's going to get caught, right? And so these are the two qualities that you hold in suspension until you arrive at this moment, which is, am I going to trust these people or not? And this is the moment when trust is earned. So before, you're vulnerable, you're optimistic, and then you fall, and this is the moment when trust is born. And there are two things that could happen right now, right? Like, option one is he could be caught, and option two is he could not, and it would just totally, totally suck for him. And so what we're trying to do is build these positive outcomes as much as we can. So let's go back to this moment of like animated suspension when he's just about to fall into the arms of his troop. And let's look at kind of three things going on. First is who. So who is the hero in this story? It's the Boy Scout, right? And the second is, what is his need? His need is that he's falling, and he needs to be caught. And the third is why. And this is really the question that keeps me up at night. Why is he falling into these people's arms? It's because he has an in real life basis for trust. And that is why. He's not falling into the arms of strangers, right? He's falling into people who he trusts. So what happens after this giant exercise is that there's this party, which I can't depict photographically, unfortunately, but you can imagine that afterwards the Boy Scouts are like, yes, we caught you, and he's like, I was caught, and there are all of these positive emotions that are associated with trust. Three of them that I just want to plant in your head. He's grateful, right? He's super grateful that he was caught. And the second is that they feel really generous, they just did something really positive for someone they care about, and they feel good about themselves. They feel really generous. And the third quality that happens is they're psyched, because they're like, oh my God, this thing happened. And I feel like I was missing this party online. The party that I have with the people that I know and trust, probably the party that I'd have with all of you if we hung out, is so different from my experience online. And I don't understand why it's so hard. So if we're to map this kind of schema of the who, the what, the where, and the why, onto the products we use. So if with Airbnb, basically this is the transaction, and what I'm looking at is ratings and reviews that are trying to lead me towards trust. Yelp, what I'm looking at is ratings and reviews that are trying to lead me towards trust. What I'm looking at is ratings and reviews that are trying to lead me to trust to buy the blender on Amazon. And with Uber, similarly, ratings and reviews to lead me to trust to buy to go with this driver. And as useful as all of this is, it doesn't make me feel awesome. Maybe I'm in the minority. And so what happens is a really interesting transaction where, in the case of Airbnb, the host and the guest is rated. And in the case of Yelp, the restaurant owner is rated. And in the case of Amazon, the manufacturer of the product is rated. And in the case of Uber, the driver and the seller is rated. So you have all of these individual actors on one side, right? And then this is what happens. All of that trust is funneled into the product. So you don't end up having trust relationships with these individuals. Fundamentally, what it builds is trust towards the product. And that's like fantastic for companies. That's really great, right? This is like why we love the brands that we do and why we trust the products that we do. To give you just this email from Grubhub made me laugh because this is the follow-up email they sent. We want you to want us. That email does not read, we want you to want the Thai restaurant that you just ordered from. It's very clear in the messaging. They want you to want Grubhub. And again, it's very natural, but it leaves this question, which is like, where's the party? Like, where is this party of trust that we all really feel, like even in this room, feels so different? And what ends up happening is that we create these trust monopolies. And so I want to be clear, like I'm the CEO of a company that has taken venture capital. And so I'm not going to slide into the places that I probably slide elsewhere. But I just want to say that these trust monopolies, what ends up happening is companies consolidate the trust. So they become practically the exclusive repository for trust, and that's kind of where all of it is aggregated. And I believe that not only are monopolies unstable fundamentally, but that the true nature of trust is really about it being circulated as much as possible. So it's not about like this hoarding mentality of like, let me get all the trust that I possibly can. It's like, how do you actually circulate trust? So today I'm going to kind of walk through our design process a little bit at Switchboard and talk about what it looks like to like release trust from the clutches of the way that we traditionally see it being held hostage, and like think about it differently. And I can't say that I have any like concrete answers for you, but this is just sort of what I think about when I think of trust. Okay, so what you're looking at is a large, awesome Pegasus painting that's for sale on Portland's Craigslist, which I kind of love. So here's this Pegasus painting. Now, when I buy the Pegasus painting, the seller is trusting that I am not going to be a homicidal psychopath, and I am trusting that he is not going to murder me. And so here's the way that this maps out on Craigslist, right? You have the who, you have the what, like whatever your thing is transacting around. You have the where, which is Craigslist, and there is no good reason. There's no good reason. There's no rating system. There is no vouching. There's no good reason why we're trusting this service, and yet it's the 12th most visited website in the United States. And I don't know if you're anything like me where you've had an experience on Craigslist, and this is then what happens. You get the Pegasus painting, and you're like, I have trust in the universe. I have trust in humanity. I have trust in my intuition. And like, it makes you release these like bigger than myself feelings of trust that are way beyond anything that could be released from a blender online. And the fact that it releases something bigger than ourselves is a question that I'm really interested in. So, Einstein said, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. And we have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. I think that ratings and reviews, we're becoming servants to them. We're becoming servants to this kind of transaction that doesn't exist online. Like, if you came over to my house for a dinner party, you would never like rate what like the meatloaf was like. Like that doesn't happen in real life. And the outcome is really different with something like Craigslist, where there's no vouching because it makes you have trust in these forces that are bigger than yourself. So over and over again, we get our needs met and we fall into the arms of total strangers on the internet. And so the question that we had when we started to think about Switchboard was like, what would happen if we fell into the arms of people that we actually trusted? And then if we went on to try to like multiply that trust online, would it be possible to create a network of love that scales? The jury is totally still out on that one, but we're trying. So first we have to go back and look at who we trust in real life. And these are some of the groups and organizations and just like the buckets of people that I've generally seen we trust. So we'll trust people from work, we'll trust people from our community of faith, we volunteer with, we might have a prior affiliation, maybe it's your alma mater, your college, or your high school, or your neighborhood, your hometown. And what makes all of these buckets really trustworthy is that we've had an opportunity to fall into their arms in the real world. and somebody on the other end has generally caught us. And so the other kind of interesting one is a person you trust. There are people that we trust that are so powerful in their leadership that you would like follow them to the ends of the earth because they're just so trustworthy. So we're trying at Switchboard to build trust between people. And I think that all of the products that we build have this opportunity to start to distribute the trust that I was talking about that seems so centralized within corporations right now. So the story of Switchboard starts at Reed College. This is my alma mater. It's a tiny liberal arts school in Portland, Oregon. Our most famous dropout is Steve Jobs, which is maybe how you've heard of it. And so I was on the alumni board at Reed, and they're using all these social media tools. And they're like, we've got a Facebook page, and we've got a Facebook group, and a LinkedIn group, and on and on and on. And ultimately what was going on is they were like held hostage behind these social networks because social networks don't serve communities of trust. They do a really bad job at it. And it's not their fault. It's just that social networks are built as attention economies to sell advertising. And so whatever trust byproduct is like very secondary to the primary goal of creating attention economies. But what's problematic about this, however, is that trust is not based on quantity. It's based on quality. So you have to have these like incredibly intimate interactions with people that lead to trust. And when you have 1,500 friends, it becomes practically impossible to actually navigate that and build trust within the community, I should say. So I want to just make a quick distinction when I say that. You could post an ask on Facebook, and chances are somebody would chime in and help you out. But that's not actually distributing trust to a broader community. You've still kind of centralized that and hoarded it for yourself in some ways. So Switchboard's MVP started actually as a telephone hotline. It was an actual switchboard, and I will play you. We can plug in. So what we did at Reed was I have a co-founder, Sean Lerner, and we both went to Reed. We were both like super obsessed with this problem. We stuck these cards with a telephone number into the mailboxes of all the students at Reed. Because we were like, this is crazy. Students are graduating with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt. They'll go on LinkedIn and be like, hey, does anyone know where I can get a job in journalism? And nobody will answer their need, which is like, it's mind-boggling that a network can't really serve them in that way. So I'm going to play you, and what we said on this card basically was, call us and ask us for anything. Like if you need a ride to the airport, can you just call us so we can help you? If you need a job or a mentor or an internship, or like you need to get hooked up with someone who works in finance, just call us because it's so much easier than this like LinkedIn group bullshit paywall like insanity. So I'm going to play you a message from a senior that we received her senior year.
Hey, my name is Aria Jochen, and I am looking to hopefully be set up with maybe a superhost in San Francisco. I'm currently already here, and I really need a place to stay for tomorrow night. If you could give me a call back, or I'll send an email also. But my number is 503-621-2, and thanks.
So why is it that Aria is calling this hotline and asking for something so basic from the network she trusts? It's because there's no other tool that was doing it. And we received countless asks. We set up every possible way that we could to glean these asks from students so we could help them. So I put Aria in touch with a friend of mine who was in San Francisco, and she had this magical experience where she showed up at his doorstep, and he was like, I'm going out of town for the weekend, but here are my keys, and I make wine, and I made you dinner, and it's in the fridge. Just this like beautiful moment. And so I got this thing called the helper's high, which is actually a thing. I became addicted to trying to help people. It was so gratifying. And Aria, because that behavior had been modeled, she became addicted to trying to pay that favor back. And it became this cycle of generosity. The helper's high is an actual thing. I'm not just making it up. So in the same way that we kind of have this dopamine release when we click the notifications on Twitter and Facebook, similarly, when we help people, it releases the brain chemicals that simulates euphoria. And we become euphoric when we help people. And what we're betting on at Switchboard is like, with enough times that chemical is hit, you actually become addicted to helping people instead of just serving your own self-interest. So at this point, what my co-founder and I knew was we needed to create this like magical trust space online, and we didn't know what that looked like. What we did know was this, that trust is a verb, as we saw with the Boy Scout who fell into the arms of his compatriots. And so what we wanted to do was make a site that was driven exclusively by action verbs. And this is kind of an earlier iteration of it. You'll see there are basically two verbs, ask and offer. And so this is what the site looks like today. So the idea is that any community can start their own switchboard, and you have this layer of trust that's the glue that's binding them together already. And so it's super easy. There are only two buttons, ask and offer. So you just click ask or offer, and that's all that it is. And we launched it for Reed, and we're now working with dozens of other communities that have their own switchboards. So I want to go back to the who and the what really quick in the Boy Scout model and talk about the who. So at Switchboard, we build for the hero. So the hero in the Boy Scout model is the Boy Scout, right? Like, he needs so much help. And similarly, Arya and Dorothy share this hero's journey. They're both on a hero's journey. And what's remarkable is all of us in our lives have at various times gone through this hero's journey where we've had to start from a place of not knowing where we were going to sleep that night in San Francisco, and then by some grace, we end up being helped by people who might know us or trust us. So this is the hero's journey for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. All of you actually are familiar with it because it's the narrative arc of like any hero ever in fiction and movies. But what happens is the hero starts in the ordinary world. So like Dorothy starts in Kansas, right? And then she gets this call to adventure, and then she goes back to NTM, and she's not sure if she's going to take the call. And then she meets the mentor. She meets Glenna the Good Witch, who basically says, I'm going to get you through this. And she crosses the threshold into this special world. And that's what happened with Arya. I was basically Glenna the Good Witch, and because, I'll own it, and because Arya made herself vulnerable in picking up the phone and calling, I was able to deliver on that vulnerability and show her that trust could exist. And then she met her host, and now she meets her allies, and then she's on her way through the special world, and she returns, and that's the hero's journey. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples from Switchboard, just so I can show you kind of how this plays out online, because it's pretty simple and kind of interesting. So this is a post from Joe, and his ask is, can you introduce me to someone at the Lego Foundation? This would get lost in the abyss of any other social network that Reed was using at the time. And so what happens is people chime in to this post, and I chose this one because Arya actually chimes in and says, I just want to say that I sincerely hope that someone here helps you. Then Joe comes back and thanks Arya. So it's that quality of gratitude that I was talking about that often arises from trust. Greg, class of 1998, so now you have this multi-generational conversation, comes in and says, I think I know someone at MIT's Media Lab. I'm happy to put you in touch. Joe comes back and says, thank you. And then Arya, who's been cheerleading this, comes back and says, hooray. Like, this is the type of party that I find a lot more gratifying than reviews and stuff. And so then what we do is we prompt users to report a success. And so Joe's success was, Greg put me in touch with a current PhD student at MIT Media Lab, who put me in touch with the director of the group, who put me in touch with the director of the research and learning at the Lego Foundation, with whom I just had an informational interview. And it's like, the gratification of a post like this cannot be described. Greg gets the helper's high. Joe believes that his network is working for him. Arya, who's been cheerleading, feels totally gratified. We over at Switchboard have like a Slack channel called Success. That's just a success feed every time this happens for us. And it's like the reason we wake up in the morning is because of posts like this. So we made a lot of the design decisions to create this space, and we were lucky enough to work with the designer Jessica Hish, who, if any of you know her work, she like is this human switchboard in the world, so it made a lot of sense for her to work with us. What I think is really interesting is that many posts start as letters. So for example, this is Hannah, who's trying to have her sanitary napkin machine in India funded. And she starts it by saying, "Hey all," and the number of posts that start like, "Dear Reedies," or "Dear Switchboard," it's probably the majority. People come to see it as like, it totally portrays the sense of trust that there's actually someone on the other line that's listening to them and is willing to receive what they're asking for. And then this is Hannah's success story. Now, Joe and Hannah and Aria share something in common, which is that I could care less about how many friends they have, or the books that they like, or the movies they like. I could care less about what they're endorsed for. All of these are the equivalent of those stars. It's the equivalent of the rating system for human beings. Because like the rating systems for human beings does not open my heart at all, which perhaps I'm in the minority, I understand that. So there are 3 ways that we found to build trust with heroes. The first is to give them a correspondent. Make them feel like there's someone on the other end that's actually listening, and just make them feel like there's actually someone who's a receiver on the other end. So how can I humanize this transaction? The second is to give them a victory lap. So when they succeed, put in place, like design for them to report that success back. That's something I really wish that Craigslist had, was just an ability, instead of posts to be deleted, to see people's needs being met. Maybe that exists. If that exists, let me know. And then the third is to give them mentors and allies. And so similarly with Joe's post, how can I bring in even more people to feel even more invested in this hero's journey? Because that ends up distributing trust and multiplying it. So really what we're doing is we're building trust by multiplying the opportunity for heroes, for mentors, and for allies. And I just want to make the distinction here. Our product is not the hero. We feel like we succeed at the end of the day when people are attributing trust to practically anything but our product. Like, that's when we know that we're sort of doing something right. So the second thing that I want to talk about is the need. When that Boy Scout was falling, you'll recall that we addressed the need, right? Which was that he needed to be caught. Abraham Maslow has a hierarchy of needs, which I'm sure many of you in the room are familiar with, but to go over it briefly, it kind of has all these levels. So at the most base level, there's breathing, food, sex, sleep. There are physiological needs that we have. The second level is safety, so security of body, of employment, resources, a roof over your head, the family. Then you have love and belonging, esteem, so self-esteem, confidence, the respect of others and by others. And then all of this culminates in like self-actualization. This is what you're trying to get to. That leads to creativity and spontaneity. And this is the kind of the hierarchy of needs as Maslow sees it. And I think that social networks right now are focusing on these 2 levels practically exclusively, I would say. You know, things like Facebook and Tinder and Instagram, they fuel this feeling of love and belonging and friendship, and that's really valuable. We need to feel that clearly because it's in the hierarchy of needs. And then, you know, things like LinkedIn and Clout, what they're doing is they're fueling this feeling of self-esteem and confidence where people are able to kind of chime in and rate us as people. And that gives us this bolstered sense of self-esteem. I think there's a gigantic opportunity for this level, which seems to have almost been totally overlooked, which is the problem of solving needs like Aria's. There are so many really fundamental needs, like I need a place to stay, I need a job, I need a mentor, and technology is for some reason really failing these needs, and I think that's because this is often the place where the marginalized reside. For, you know, it's like, oh, those are marginalized, only marginalized people have needs like that. We're gonna build Tinder for dogs. And so as a result, we're like, there's this giant missed opportunity. And I wanna give an example of this, which is the Ferguson protesters. They needed all these materials for their protests, right? And how they ended up solving this basic human need was they created an Amazon wedding registry of like gloves, like we need, you know, like sleeping bags, and this is what we're working with when it comes to social movements right now. And I believe that something is very flawed when people who trust each other have to rely on wedding registries to build social movements, just personally. So this is not a new problem. People have had basic human needs since the beginning of time, and one really elegant solution actually came from the US government. The USDA's Farm Service had HayNet. So there was a farm shortage in Middle America, and so they created this website called HayNet. There were only two things you could do: need hay, have hay. So, like, why? Yeah. So we have a switchboard for farmers in Portland, and this gets to this basic need. Farmers need to sell their meat. So this farmer posts an offer for locally raised pigs, and I won't show you all of the successes that he's had as a result of that from customers interested in buying local sustainable meat. Here's a person, we have a switchboard for women cyclists. This is someone who was looking for a bike to borrow in Portland, and she just kind of put this out to this women's cycling network, and she responded back, and this is her success. I've been telling anyone who will listen about how awesome Portland and its residents are. Thank you to this board, to April, the person who helped her, to Wheel Women, which is the name of the switchboard. You are all the best, and I can't wait to be able to return the favor. This to me is very different. Just the number of people that she's expressed gratitude towards is quite remarkable, right? It's to our product, it's to the person who helped her, it's to the person who built that community, it's to the city of Portland. Every possible nook and cranny is filled with gratitude from this person. So at Reed, at Switchboard, like, this is what we're trying to do. It doesn't matter what you transact around. It's actually quite secondary. The point is, how do we multiply these transactions and make more people feel invested? And then how is our product actually almost like eclipsed by the strength of these communities that are in fact the fabric of civil society and the social contract? So there are three ways to build trust with needs. The first is so simple, but whatever you build actually meet a need. So ask yourself the question, is it social grooming or is it meeting a need? Which layer of that hierarchy does your product fall into? The second is to model reciprocity. So when you're building, think about, like, okay, now that we have the successful transaction, what can we do to spread the magic and have it keep going and have it circulate? And the third is to give people and not the product credit. And it's against every single impulse that we have when we build our products, because we want to be like, look, we built this thing, it's us. But if you give that credit to people, that really ends up distributing the trust. I want to just be clear that this doesn't always work on Switchboard, and we've had a number of failures. That would be a whole separate talk. But one, that just came over the transom recently was this ask, what do you like about Californians? And this is not meeting a need. We have so few posts like this. But what ended up resulting was just this flame war against Californians. And it totally didn't serve a need, and it was like we had to completely redesign how we thought about community standards. This is really rare, but you can see how pernicious something like a discussion forum behavior, how it totally sours the tone of a switchboard when you bring that in, because it's like, here's me and my unsolicited opinion, and now we're just gonna chat about bullshit. So Nietzsche says that the most basic form of human stupidity is forgetting what we're trying to accomplish. And I guess my hope to you would just be, whatever you build, try to accomplish something. So how do you know if you've helped the hero and you've accomplished something? Well, there are three signs of trust behavior. The first is that people end up being better. They're generous. You see generous behavior. The second is people are grateful. You see that people start to just thank everyone they possibly can, like that woman in Portland. And the third is that people are psyched. They're psyched to be there. They're psyched to be part of something bigger than themselves. It feels like a party. So I'll leave you with this. Lewis Hyde says that the spirit of a gift is kept alive by its constant donation. And I think the technology is actually a gift, and we have a responsibility to share it in this way. So I'll leave you with these three takeaways, and thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome.